Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Worth It Then, Worth It Now, an ongoing side project I do on this channel where I look at games of yesteryear. They're not exactly in season or in vogue, but they're generally speaking games near and dear to my heart that I think deserve a bit of a shout out, and I tend to couple this with a sale. So today's no different, we're looking at Loop Hero, which at the time of this video going up should be on ultra deep sale. We're talking a couple of bucks and it's an absolute steal. I love this game to death, and it's one of those things that booting it back up just adds yet another thing to tear me away from whatever it is I was playing yesterday, because I just want to play Loop Hero now. So very high praise. Now, if you missed this at launch, it's unique, it's doing something unusual, but it's drawing a lot of inspiration from, you know, the idler action roguelite type wave that we've seen, but its own twist, blurring together a bunch of different cool mechanics, and it all works really well. And I'm surprised it hasn't really been aped on more. There was one game that was copying it very closely, and I think they even got into legal issues. But, you know, let's leave that for the moment. So the setup for Loop Hero is pretty basic. The world's been wiped out of existence. You know, it's dealing with the more intangible concept of not just out of existence, but out of memory, out of time. So everything's just wiped away into blackness, right? And you're some dude that's popped back in. You obviously have a bit of an amnesia component, but it focuses right on trying to manifest things into existence and sort of trying to remember them into permanency. And how this all manifests in a gameplay, at least in the split, is you have a meta town that you're building, and these random survivors come walking out of the nothingness and they're confused what's going on, and they're all trying to work together and build up. But look, it's an unusual, like I said, intangible, this mystical concept of lost beyond memory is actually quite compelling, and they explore it fairly well for what it is, a light story to accompany a very gameplay-centric game. Like, grapple with this, you have these villagers and they're talking about how what are clear remains of other people around them in the village, you know, like you've seen where they live or where they've been habitating or things left behind, but that person has disappeared out of existence and no one can remember them because they disappear out of memory as well. So it's kind of horror in a weird way, but it's an interesting trapping that, you know, it gets its hook in you. It's intrigue based and you're curious where it's going. So with you and along with the collective memory of your growing village, you build these little upgrade buildings that will help you in future runs. You know, mechanically it serves as an in-between meta gameplay stat currency dump, and it's very heavy on farming all the different resources and currencies and that. So much so it has like a conversion system. You get like 12 food scraps and that turns into a ration, that sort of thing, right? The game very much outsources a lot into the meta progression, which I'm critical of that as a gameplay solution in general. However, when it gets away with it is in examples like this, where the gameplay is just so solid that you don't really care that the game's making you grind the loop. Long and short, it has an outsized meta progression component, but it's not so bad because the moment to moment is just so good. And what is the moment to moment? Well, ultimately you pick a hero and you'll unlock more, but you just start with the basic warrior, and he has an RPG equipment set, you know, like sword, board, armor, ring, that sort of thing. You can slot stuff as you pick up, but ultimately all you do is you just let him run. It'll create this one screen block of a world instance with a circular map. I think you can go clockwise or counterclockwise, it doesn't really matter, right? But essentially this dude is just trying to run loops, almost like a race car, right? And there's a finish line that resets. There's a day-night cycle as well as you go along, and that can tie into things like healing per day, which is these sort of RPG stats that you can build into. Other examples are things like vampirism, since we're on the topic of healing, right? So there's actually a fairly robust skill set that you can build lots of different characters into for different build types. But the way the gameplay plays out is that you don't really control your dude. He just runs laps, and if he hits an enemy, it goes into an auto battler turn-based combat. You know, they have a charging bar above their head, hits a dude, your dude fights, the enemies fight back, you lose health, you don't so much gain XP as much as you pick up gear and loot. And, you know, if you walk through a certain area like a cemetery, I think you'll pick up stone. You walk through a forest or a swamp or something like that, you'll pick up twigs. Go through a farm, I think you'll get rations, right? That sort of thing. So ultimately, you just want your dude to keep doing as many laps as possible, going through as many points of interest as possible, picking up resources to bring home. So far, it's all passive though. Your interfacing is through the cards that you collect at the bottom of the screen. Call it a hand. It is made from a deck that you custom build between missions, and depending on your meta upgrades, like if you build farms back home, you can take farmland or bloody, I can't even remember off the top of my head, villages, all sorts of unusual different cards into your deck, and you actually place them as locations in the world. And they can be directly on the path in some instances, like the aforementioned cemetery, and that will in turn have its own, let's call it a negative quirk, where it will spawn a skeleton every 3 days, right? And we mentioned the day-night cycle, and you can try and offset that with maybe you'll have like bonus lanterns that make it so if you walk over certain squares that it covers in its radius, you move faster, so you can try and beat out the day-night cycle. But at the same time, killing the skeleton or whatever monster, they will yield rewards that are roughly on your character's level. And I can't remember, I don't have it in front of me, if you level up through XP, or you might just level up every lap. Like once you do a lap, you go to level 2 to 3 to 4. And the gear, much like something like Vermintide, is level adjacent. So if you're level 4, you're only going to pick up level 4 or 5 gear, that sort of stuff. So you're slowly metering your gear out as your dude edges forward, placing locations on the world, whether it's directly on the path or adjacent to the path. You know, there's like a vampire house. Now that doesn't strictly put on a tile or even put a creature on the table. But if you encounter an enemy in the radius that's covered by the vampire, then a vampire will join that fight. So you might be just fighting a skeleton or a slime or something, but the vampire backs him up. And you got to be careful because you can make some interesting synergies, but that's the real magic to this game, is you don't want to accidentally make like a 4 stack of a goblin camp with bonuses and all sorts of stuff, and you are just outweighed and your dude dies basically. But at the same time, you kind of want to push it without running at ultimately a negative life. Or I guess you'll come up with your own idiosyncratic way to run loops and the healing and the balancing of your throughput. But if you make it too easy and you just place down tiles willy-nilly, the boss will eventually appear because you place down X tiles and you'll probably get dumpstered. Not to mention you probably won't get many rewards. Likewise, if you overdo it, you might just die from enemies. So you want to find that magic middle ground of essentially placing obstacles intentionally in your dude's way to toughen him up, to scar tissue him up and level him up with better gear. And there's all sorts of weird synergies. Like I only jumped in for B-roll at the beginning, but later on you can make like flowing rivers, and you can do adjacency. You put like a bunch of rock or mountain tiles next to each other in like a 3x3 block. You'll make a super mountain, and occasionally that'll spawn bloody harpies that'll fly down off that and land somewhere randomly on your loop. So the real nuance is in understanding this light card mechanic that is turned into more of placing down and, you know, visualizing a world, building it out, much like the theme at the beginning, you know, nothingness, and trying to build it into something, and building meadows and mountains and all this sort of stuff in such a way to try and boost your character and leverage an advantage while he just auto-laps collecting resources and fighting bad guys. It's so cool. It's so interesting, and it does a really good job of exploring this modern wave, you know, which started with Vampire Survivors, which is to say we have these idling of traditional action mechanics. Like Vampire Survivors, before Vampire Survivors, would have been more of a twin-stick shooter trying to skill shot, right? But instead they make that mechanic automatic and outsource the player engagement into a more cerebral component, which is, you know, build crafting. So it automates the smaller rock-crushing gameplay loop and frees you up for much more of a mental gymnastics, tactics come strategic layer, and Loop Hero takes it to that next level. And so it's really engaging, it's really addicting. The soundtrack is cracked. The boss fight for the first biome was like my stream intro when I streamed years ago. Oh my god, still one of the best tracks going. But yeah, Loop Hero, for a couple of dollars, it's an absolute steal. If you're just reminiscing with me, maybe reinstall it, check it out. If maybe you're sold, or not even, maybe you're on the fence. I can't see how after my descriptive, energetic explanation you wouldn't be interested in seeing it. You gotta give it a go. It's a couple of bucks. Pick it up, do yourself a favor, get an early Christmas present. Anyway, let's put a pin in it there, team. Might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.